Good morning, commissioners, mayors, council members, and other distinguished elected officials. My name is Stuart Summers, and I am the Chief Communications and Engagement Officer for RTD, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this morning. Today's forum will provide an update about RTD and allow time for follow-up questions at the end of the presentation. Please note that the video recording of today's session will be made available on RTD's website as soon as is practicable following the conclusion of today's meeting. Now, before continuing with today's program, I would first like to extend a welcome to Chair Lynn Geisinger of RTD's Board of Directors. Chair Geisinger.
Thank you, Stuart. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for coming. I'd first like to recognize our Board of Directors. I can't really ask you all to stand at this point since it's a Zoom call, but maybe give a wave. Most of our directors are here. There are 15 of us, and they're here to support you. I also want to thank our GM CEO, Deborah Johnson, Stuart Summers, Michael Davies, Jen Webster from Catalyst, and other staff members who are working to increase RTD's community engagement. It's critical, and this is a great effort that's being put in. Mostly, we want to listen and hear from you and your teams. Our board members are very active in their communities. Several have been on city council. A couple have been mayors. We've had a legislator, leaders of metro mayors, and we all share the goal that staff is working on to improve our engagement and outreach efforts. Many of your staff are involved in the sub-regional service councils, and today's meeting is an important step in the agency's efforts to listen. There's no question in my mind that the future of RTD will be closely tied to its ability to partner with all of you and our other stakeholders in the community. You hear about RTD all the time on the news, some good, some bad, and I think you'll find that some of the background to these stories that you'll hear today will be very helpful. Many of you know your board members. Our goal is to work with staff to be sure you're getting what you need in the future. We're open to coming regularly to your commission or council meetings, and we are available to answer questions and hear your feedback. So on behalf of the board of directors, thanks for joining us this morning to hear all these important updates.
Thank you, Chair Geisinger, for your public service and leadership. Following today's presentation, members of the virtual audience will have an opportunity to ask questions, and to best support fielding as many questions as possible today, we ask that you use Zoom's chat feature. You're also welcome to submit questions during the presentation to be addressed following the prepared remarks. It is now my pleasure to introduce General Manager and CEO Deborah Johnson. Ms. Johnson joined RTD in 2020 as the General Manager and CEO, bringing decades of transit experience to this role. Please join me in welcoming General Manager and CEO, Ms. Deborah Johnson.
Thank you so much, Stuart, and good morning. And thank you all for engaging in this important discussion. As introduced, I am Deborah Johnson and serve as the General Manager and CEO of the Regional Transportation District. I joined this agency in November of 2020 and from the outset have been focused on understanding and addressing the challenges and pain points of the customers and communities that RTD serves. Working in close collaboration with the board of directors, I set out to establish a long-term strategy for the agency that would allow RTD to refocus its collective efforts and bolster the agency's value to the community as the region's only multimodal transit service provider. The RTD board adopted the agency's 5-year strategic plan in August of 2021. Among the plan's 4 strategic priorities, community value is first, and for good reason. This priority states that RTD strives to be a strong community partner, providing value to customers as well as to the broader Denver metro region while sustaining planet Earth. This meeting is being held today, first, to uphold that commitment of being a strong community partner, and as this meeting serves as an opportunity to foster engagement and dialogue with you as elected officials representing constituencies across the region. Further, this meeting is intended to share information on a number of critical topics that you can in turn share with constituents and stakeholders. And of course, this is an opportunity, as you heard from Mr. Summers, as well as from Chair Geisinger, to solicit feedback from all of you. If we could advance the presentation, please. As we engage with you this morning, you will receive updates on a number of key topics that have been raised by elected officials and community stakeholders on a regular basis. First, I will touch on RTD's people power and the process being made to attract and retain people power necessary to deliver high quality transit services across the agency's 2,342 square mile service area. Second, I will discuss ongoing efforts to restore and maintain a welcoming transit environment. Third, I will touch on the agency's Call for Projects Partnership Program. Fourth, I will provide an update on recommendations from RTD's system-wide fare study and equity analysis. And lastly, RTD's Government Relations Officer, Michael Davies, will cover RTD's efforts to improve engagement with local elected officials. Next slide, please. Before getting to the first topic, on the slide showcases RTD's governing structure, which is comprised of 15-member board of directors that is elected directly by a constituency. And Chair Geisinger referenced our very dynamic board in her opening comments. Additionally, on the slide, you will see a list of transit services provided. RTD serves 8 counties and 40 municipalities, which highlights the importance of holding this meeting on a regular basis and working to expand engagement opportunities with each jurisdiction to ensure that you as elected officials have the latest information to respond to constituents on the topic of public transportation. Next slide, please. As I'm sure you are all aware, employers in the Denver metro area are not alone in experiencing challenges in attracting, hiring, and retaining critical staff. While RTD is certainly among those entities striving to keep pace with workforce recruitment, indicators show that the agency is making steady progress and is on the right path toward workforce sustainability. As a component of a holistic, comprehensive operational analysis, RTD has completed a system-wide optimization plan, which most of you may be familiar, which was coined the SOP, an acronym for, to realign transit service delivery with available financial and human resources. The SOP recommends an increase in service frequency and restoration of certain routes through 2027. It is self-evident that a workforce to operate and maintain transit assets is critical to delivering a service increase. By way of the agency's 5-year strategic plan, RTD has made attracting and retaining a highly skilled and engaged workforce a top strategic priority. As an example of this commitment, in the 2023 agency budget, year over year, expenses were reduced in every area except for an increase in funding to support expanding, hiring, and retention efforts of our most valuable asset, which is people power. Going forward to the next slide, please. This illustrates the concrete progress RTD has made on expanding its workforce. These numbers show hires across the agency and not only operators, because I know oftentimes I get questions relative to operators. As you can see, the agency lost more employees in 2021 than were gained. Whereas in 2022, this trend was reversed and significantly more employees joined RTD than separated. This positive trend has continued in the first 2 calendar months of 2023, and I am optimistic hiring will continue at a similar pace. Lastly, making progress on attracting and retaining a workforce only improves the RTD customer experience to the extent that it translates into improved service offerings. While progress may be incremental, RTD is currently soliciting public feedback on the May 2023 service change recommendations that would increase service delivery for the first time in several years. On a positive note, just this week, it was Monday morning, a large class of 40 individuals participated in a new employee orientation session. And I have to tell you, when I had the opportunity to engage, it represented a broad spectrum of our workforce, from RTD police officers to service and cleaning personnel, to information technology specialists, to bus operators, to mechanics alike. Moving forward to the next slide, please. While an orientation class of that size is certainly a welcome sight, considering the number of existing open positions and the current turnover rate, RTD would need to hire more than 1,000 individuals or 88 employees each month to achieve budgeted staffing levels by the end of the calendar year of 2023. Also important to note, the agency's current turnover rate equates to 1 employee per day. And whereas bus and rail operator vacancy rates are improving, vacancies in other critical positions continue to climb. For example, vacancy rates in both the bus and light rail vehicle maintenance groups are 33% and 35% respectively. That said, I remain optimistic that the expansion of the agency's recruiting capabilities, coupled with recent efforts to secure market competitive wages and salaries for employees across the board, meaning our represented employees, which constitutes 2/3 of our workforce, and our non-representative employees, will result in increased hiring in the coming months. Next slide, please. So, moving on, another area in which RTD has focused its efforts is restoring and maintaining a welcoming transit environment for all customers utilizing the transportation network. As you have no doubt seen through local media coverage, crime and antisocial behaviors have impacted transit services across the region, and particularly in the area surrounding Denver Union Station, which serves as our transportation network's intermodal hub. However, as I have often said, public transit is interwoven into the community served. So where there is crime in a given area, so too will that crime impact transit and other public spaces and services. Moreover, Denver is not alone in this plight. Metropolitan areas across the country are experiencing societal problems that have only been exacerbated by the pandemic. As you all know, RTD alone cannot address these societal issues and must rely on collaborative efforts with state and local governmental entities and stakeholders to ensure the transit environment remains welcoming to customers. Next slide, please. So the slide before you and the next provides a few important steps that RTD is taking to ensure customers can experience a welcome environment throughout the transportation network. First, RTD is expanding its police force, including adding 6 commander positions that will oversee a specific area within RTD's region to improve accountability. More so by having these regions, it will enable us to leverage a community-based policing strategy where individuals that are in these public spaces will gain some familiarity with those that are deployed to those public areas as well. Additionally, an expanded police force will help RTD provide police presence along bus routes and on RTD rail lines, and that's both light rail and commuter rail. These sworn police officers are only part of the equation, as transit security personnel provided through a contract with Allied Universal continue to supplement RTD's overall security presence. Second, after working closely with Denver Police Department to produce an analysis of Denver Union Station and the surrounding areas, RTD is continuing to implement security enhancements at Denver Union Station aimed at deterring crime through a concept known in police circles as crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED. Next slide, please. Thirdly, RTD is actively working with municipalities in the region to share information and resources to address crime and antisocial behaviors impacting transit services. As a provider of public transit service, RTD must rely on its jurisdictional partners for social and mental health service support, as the agency prides itself on having the acumen to plan and deliver transit services. RTD has also collaborated and partnered with police departments from around the region. For example, the agency has entered into secondary deployment agreements with Denver, Thornton, Aurora, and Lakewood to bolster police resources in those areas. Further, RTD has responded to reports of theft in park and ride lots. For example, at the Table Mesa Park and Ride lot in Boulder, RTD has worked with Boulder Police to install security cameras, implement a theft prevention program to recommend individual actions to improve security, and designating short and long-term parking to help with monitoring. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that theft prevention program. Our officers, when they're doing foot patrols, are going through the parking area and looking at vehicles. So say, for instance, if they see someone's left something that may be appealing for those with a inclination to disturb someone's personal vehicle, our police officers are leaving a report card, very analogous to letter grades that one would get when they're matriculating in school, letting them know if, in fact, they have something sitting on the seat of their vehicle. If a mobile device is in view, they're grading them. This, in turn, is helping individuals to recognize that when they are parking in these public spaces, that they should take an extra level of caution to ensure that they are not enticing somebody with criminal inclinations to prey upon them. And we have had quite a bit of success with deploying these report cards as we go back on subsequent occasions and notice alternate behaviors that have taken place. So this has aided us in helping to change behaviors. Going further to the next slide, please. Now I'll switch gears and move to the Call for Projects Partnership Program. As you all know, RTD serves as the regional transit provider. Simply put, we are the R in RTD. And there is often an expectation that the agency provides localized transit service, which is a structure atypical among regional transit agencies throughout the country. The call to establish partnerships to supplement local mobility options has been a constant theme among communities in which I have engaged in my many roles at transit agencies across the country. So now, as we move forward to the next slide, I am pleased to report that RTD is moving to embrace the partnership model, which is anticipated to scale up as the participation increases and finances allow. The slide before you illustrates how the program is envisioned to work. So simply put, you clearly see the why, the what, and the how. And I'll just take a quick second to elaborate. As I noted in earlier slides, that RTD provides service for 40 municipalities in 8 counties. And at the same time, the agency provides the regional transit backbone across a large service area of 2,342 square miles. For sake of comparison, one of the agencies in which I previously worked, the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, has a service area of only 49 square miles while experiencing 3 times the ridership volume than RTD. And I'd like to note there are also 26 other transit agencies in the immediate area of the San Francisco Bay Area region. As you can see, resource management in terms of vehicles, facilities, and people power is a constant and significant challenge. RTD recently concluded a year-long comprehensive operations analysis, as I referred to earlier as the system optimization plan, to really look at and optimize the agency services to align with revenue sources, both in the midterm and the long term. RTD, as I indicated in previous slides, is focused on growing the agency's people power to deliver service frequency and route coverage outlined in the SOP. In order to provide expanded localized services, RTD will need to partner with local jurisdictions to bring resources to the table. As such, RTD is establishing the Call for Projects Partnership Program. Each city or county can deliberate on a proposed localized service, such as circulators or shuttles, to name a few potential concepts. And let me be clear, I'm just naming these. We are open to new ideas and continuous improvements we may get from the Call for Projects applications. And those applications will be submitted by each county or city and will be discussed and endorsed and prioritized within the Sub-Regional Service Council. This process is envisioned to work similar to Dr. Cobb's Regional and Sub-Regional Transportation Improvement Plan, i.e. the TIP process. Once the sub-regional service councils have discussed and selected project applications for advancement, RTD will then work with successful applicants to establish the proposed localized service. So I know there's questions about when might we expect this. I can speak from a place of knowing, having conferred with the project team that's worked diligently on this. Stay tuned, because in the next couple of weeks, you will be hearing about announcements as we go forward relative for the call for projects for this year. So with that as the backdrop, we at RTD clearly understand that any new service will need time to establish community awareness and utilization. Therefore, we envision proposed localized services to be established for more than 1 year. And lastly, but most importantly, performance measures will be used to determine the effectiveness and feasibility of continuing any initial proposed localized services. Moving to the next slide, please. So I will now provide an update on RTD's system-wide fare study and equity analysis, which is currently underway and entering its final phases. Before we transition to the next slide, I would just like to say, as we talk about our commitment to our people power, and as we look at the call for project partnerships and the system-wide fare study and equity analysis, these initiatives combined will leverage RTD as we look to delivering transit services in the future, recognizing that all of these initiatives will decrease the barriers to entry as relates to utilizing public transport here in the metropolitan region. So going forward to the next slide, please. On this slide, you will see 3 goals. And RTD has worked in lockstep to guide the fare study and equity analysis by having a laser focus on equity, affordability, and simplicity. Moving forward to the next goal, or the next slide. Based upon months of feedback panels, public input, and surveys, RTD developed 2 fare concepts. Alternative A focused on the goal of affordability, whereas Alternative B focused on the goal of simplicity. After receiving additional community and stakeholder feedback, Alternative B was identified as the clear favorite throughout the region. Let's move forward to the next slide so I can delve a little deeper. This slide depicts the proposed draft fare structure that will be before the board of directors in April. The proposed fare structure incorporates elements from both Alternative A and Alternative B that received favorable feedback. As you can see, the proposed structure establishes a flat fare system-wide and eliminates zone-based cost distinctions for customers traveling throughout the service area, with the sole exception of the airport. A common theme I have heard during my time leading this organization is that fares are too high across the spectrum. I am pleased to report that the system-wide fare study and equity analysis supports lower fares in both fare categories. For example, the current cost for a monthly pass is $200, whereas the proposed cost is $88, less than half of the current fare rate, and the $88 cost includes the airport fare. Discounts for seniors, people with disabilities, and Medicare recipients are all aligned at approximately 50% of the full fare for 3-hour or day passes, respectively, and monthly passes are further discounted. RTD's income-based discount pass program, the LIVE program, will increase the income threshold from 185% to 250% of the federal poverty level, therefore expanding access to the program. Lastly, and certainly not least, RTD is recommending to the board of directors a zero fare for youth pilot program for those 19 years of age and under to utilize the system for zero fare. In conjunction with technologies such as fare capping, which limits the amount a pass holder customer will have to pay. For instance, each day or each month, these fare changes truly offer all customers a more equitable, affordable, and simplistic fare structure. So next slide, please. So looking at the next steps, just for everyone's edification, the Federal Transit Administration requires a public comment period for fare changes of this scale. The Federal Transit Administration basically requires this because it's in conjunction with compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So with that, after the public comment period is concluded, RTD will conduct an equity analysis in accordance with Title VI. Should the Board of Directors adopt the proposed draft structure this summer, implementation is anticipated in early 2024. So at this time, I will pass the virtual microphone over to Government Relations Officer Michael Davies for a few closing comments on RTD's commitment to bolster engagement efforts with local elected officials throughout the region. I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity for me to present this important information to you this morning. And we all, on behalf of our staff and the Board of Directors, look forward to engaging with you in the months ahead and the years as well. So Mr. Davies, the floor is now yours, sir.
Thank you, and hello, commissioners, mayors, council members, and all who have joined. My name is Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. I'm going to round out this presentation, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how RTD is improving our efforts around local elected official engagement. Next slide, please. So, as you'll see here, in December of 2022, RTD sent a short survey to all commissioners, mayors, and council members that serve in the RTD district. Out of 286 surveys sent, only 31 of the region's local elected officials responded. That's not a great response rate, but it does not diminish the important feedback that we heard from you all. And RTD is taking that feedback seriously and building it into the way we respond. Overall, the #1 suggestion for improvement was to have RTD board directors and staff more regularly attend city councils and county commission meetings to report out on projects and priorities. This is reflected in the key takeaways listed on this slide. Additionally, it was notable that the majority of responses came from Adams County, Arapahoe County, and Jefferson County. That doesn't mean that we're going to ignore all the rest of the counties. This was just the response rates that we saw. And then lastly, the vast majority of respondents were council members. So using this information, RTD is using that to guide the agency's response. RTD, working through the agency's contracted public affairs firm, Catalyst Public Affairs, is in the process of reaching out to all of your city and county managers to engage and schedule a time to come before your city council or commission. RTD understands that this meeting is a very large meeting and therefore presents challenges to asking questions or digging into the level of detail that you might desire. For that reason, I want to ensure you all that this is just the beginning of the conversation and engagement with RTD, and RTD looks forward to participating in your council and commission meeting to regularly provide updates and an opportunity to discuss items of interest that were presented today or any item of interest on the topic of public transportation. With that, that'll conclude my remarks. Thank you all for your time and interest today, and I'll pass the presentation back to Mr. Summers.
Thank you, Michael and Ms. Johnson. At this time, Ms. Johnson and Michael Davies and other members of RTD's leadership team will answer questions from the audience. Questions can be asked using Zoom's Q&A feature that's at the bottom of your screen, or you can raise your virtual hand to ask a question live. If you are participating by telephone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, and I will call on you to ask your question. And of course, to unmute yourself, press *6. And we will answer as many questions as we can in the time remaining. And it looks like we have a hand raised from Commissioner Odorizio. I will let you ask your question.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So the new program, the partner program, seems like it's a new set aside of funding to allow locals to participate and have some skin in the game, maybe to stretch the dollars. I think that all sounds really good, but is that correct?
Yes, thank you so much for your question. And you're absolutely,
That's the setup to the question, but go ahead. Help me understand that part first.
yes, I was merely saying, sir, that you are correct in your assumption relative to localized services and having skin in the game.
Got it. I think it makes sense what you guys are trying to do as far as trying to encourage partnerships and collaboration. The challenge for me is, how do we not look at this where we feel like we haven't completed even promises made already? And in fact, there's also been some reduction of services in our area. Yet by the time folks in these underrepresented neighborhoods and communities get to the front of the line for funding and projects, it feels like then that's always when the line is rearranged, and now we have to go back into the middle or the end of the line. Because the funding that's going to go towards this is funding that really should be going to finishing the promises that have been made in the past. And it just further creates tension with local governments and folks in my community when I say, look, we're getting there. They're getting all the projects done in the I would say more privileged areas of the town. And now we finally get to the front of the line, and now there's rearranging of the line with a whole new program where more money is going to be put elsewhere. And now we're asked to pitch in even more in order to compete to complete these projects.
So, Commissioner, thank you very much for your comments. I would like to provide some clarification to the statement and answer your question holistically. So I would surmise, and I would ask you to correct me if I'm mistaken, when you're talking about the commitment, I would surmise that you're speaking of the Fast Tracks program. Would that be a correct assumption on my part?
Yeah, and reductions of service and lines elsewhere as well.
Okay, thank you very kindly for that clarification. So a couple of things, as I was presenting to everyone, as we talk about reduction in service, I would state that RTD's budget holistically is 75% labor intensive, meaning that we can't deliver service if we don't have people. And it pains me as being a public transportation professional that we can't deliver service of which this system was designed to do because we don't have people power. Recognizing, as we talked about the system optimization plan, that is our intent to leverage service based upon the resources available. And we have made a commitment within the organization to attract and retain people power, because we aren't able to do any type of work without. So recognizing as we go forward, utilizing the system optimization plan as a roadmap, that we are adding service back based upon ridership frequencies and other aspects of factors that we take into consideration for service delivery. That remains a top commitment for the agency, and the board adopted guidelines relative to that as we go forward to make those very important decisions. Also looking at it through an equity lens, as I pointed out, as we talk about Title VI, not just from a fair equity vantage point, but also Title VI in reference to service equity. Moving forward to the other portion of the question regarding the call for project partnership. This program is monies in which the agency has set aside, but I want to be clear in reference to providing localized services in partnership with counties and other municipalities and jurisdiction, that those monies provide localized services or basically designed to meet the mobility needs of a certain municipality, recognizing that there is multiple factors relative to providing a vast array of mobility options. So what I will say is, in certain areas, based upon mobility needs and activity centers and the movement of people and population, an area may not need a 60-foot articulated bus. There may be a need in a different area to move people from one activity center to another, being, a housing development to a multifaceted employment site. And so we may need a smaller mobility conveyance, such as a Sprinter van or things of the like. Those monies don't constitute the same level of monies for a major capital project undertaking relative to something of the caliber of fast tracks. And in recognizing that RTD is a regional network, what we're trying to do in tandem and foster a partnership is hone in on the mobility options that might be the most beneficial to connect to the regional network, and utilize this to determine collectively with those in those sub-regional service councils that understand the needs of those communities better than RTD does, for instance, as a stepping stone as we go forward. So I'm not discounting what you said about the Greater Fast Tracks program, recognizing that that was something that came to fruition with the Voice of the People in 2004. And I would say that is top of mind for our policy body, and I can yield the floor to our chair to expand as well, as I don't want to speak for the board, but from staff's perspective and as the leader of the organization, it's something that hasn't fallen upon deaf ears, recognizing I wasn't here in the environment when that came to fruition, but I do recognize the importance of that program and considering where we are collectively and trying to be agile and flexible with the adverse impacts of mobility and the movement, especially in this new era, we stay readily flexible and adept and adaptable to move forward. So thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to some of the questions in the chat, and then I will come back to Commissioner Layden in a minute. This comes from Malcolm Fleming in the town of Erie. GM Johnson, I applaud your and RTD's actions to address employee hiring and retention issues and crime issues. Also, the project's partnership program sounds promising. However, in Erie, we estimate that Erie's 35,000 residents pay over $7 million in taxes to RTD annually, while Erie receives only $2 million in RTD services. Thus, any partnership with RTD needs first to address this inequity before expecting Erie to pay more to get equitable share of RTD services. Will you commit to addressing this inequity?
So recognizing, and thank you very much for the question, and I appreciate your comments, and I am empathetic to them holistically. So I would be remiss to say I have a commitment there. I'm committed and very relative to what may be put forward through the sub-regional service council. We will look at that through the lens of equity, because recognizing that RTD provides services holistically, when we talk about equity, we have to look at the service area as a whole and not a specific jurisdiction as it relates to people moving to and fro, as it's outlined collectively in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically to Title VI. So with that as the backdrop there, I am committed to ensuring that we can look through a lens whereby we can be creative in providing mobility options to and fro for the betterment of the region as a whole. And I'm happy to engage in a more specific discussion with the question that was posed, not understanding all the nuances that were just presented in light of the question.
We are now going to go to Commissioner Layden, who has his hand raised to ask his question.
Great. So thank you so much for engaging with all of us. I do have to really compliment RTD for the recent engagement in Douglas County. It sounds like you're making the tour, and we appreciate that. But I think I need to be extremely candid. As chair of the Board of County Commissioners in Douglas County, met with all of our police chiefs in our municipalities and our sheriff just yesterday. And with the open drug use in light rail cars and elevators, recent shootings in our RTD station, recent Ryder fentanyl exposure, RTD is now fostering a public health crisis in Douglas County. How do you intend to ramp up the public safety issue as a top priority for our community and everyone on this call?
So thank you very much, Commissioner Layden. I appreciate the question. And for those that are virtually assembled, Mr. Layden and I have had an opportunity to have some conversations. So let me be clear, Commissioner, that RTD is committed to creating a welcoming transit environment. As I was stating in my comments, recognizing that these antisocial behaviors and criminal activities often are seen in public rights of way, RTD prides itself on being a leader in delivering public transit services. However, we don't have the acumen relative to deter these antisocial behaviors. With that as a backdrop, specifically, our police chief has been reaching out and working with a myriad of different police forces. And if I'm not mistaken, there is activity underway to engage with Douglas County specifically. And so keeping in mind that rampant drug use and all these other criminal activity aren't indigenous to RTD, they happen to occur in public spaces in which we're traversing arterials and in various municipalities. It's all about a partnership going forward. We alone can't solve this problem because it's a societal problem, but in reference to working cooperatively and collectively, RTD is leaning in to engage on a myriad of different fronts, looking at social service agencies while we have one unhoused clinician to work with those that need services. And we have partnered with mental health care clinicians, of which I believe we have two. That is not going to mitigate or eradicate the problem. So it's a plea in reference to everyone assembled on this call that we need assistance because we don't have the people with the expertise in this space, and that all eyes and ears are paramount if we collectively are going to address this problem. But more specifically, there needs to be work done to basically address it from a humanistic vantage point as well. So I know that our chief is going to engage specifically with Douglas County. There are meetings that are being set up. And I will say here, come one, come all, as we can talk about partnership activities. And perhaps what we can do is create a forum by which there can be some, ideation sessions whereby we can figure out how best we do this relative to the activities that are happening in and around these public rights of way.
Well, thank you for that response.
You're welcome, sir, and thank you for your engagement.
Next question we're going to take from chat. This is Don Cameron, City of Golden. Is it possible that closing last mile connections via pedestrian or bike could be a PPP option? Not with shuttles, but even bike or pedestrian infrastructure improvements.
Thank you so much for the question. And I would say, recognizing where we are, we're open to new ideas. So I would say on the face of it, let's delve in and have conversations. And we can do some follow-up relative to that. One thing I do want to say, that I don't know if you mentioned Mr. Summers, but we will circle back with a survey and ask, was this helpful? And, basically reach out to see what topics could be top of mind for different communities, so we could delve into that. So I would say on the face of it, let's have a conversation and see what might work best for end-of-line stations, because while we are in the region, we recognize that there are characteristics that are unique to the various municipalities of the 40 municipalities that are within the RTD service area.
We're going to go to a live question with a hand raised, and I'm going to call on Andrew Sowish.
Thank you. Andrew Sowish, trustee for the town of Erie. So here in the town of Erie, we may have the least service out of any municipality within the RTD service area. As our town administrator, Malcolm Fleming, just noted moments ago, we have millions of dollars being contributed through the residents' tax dollars. If ridership will be the basis of expanded services, and we have been so underserved over the years that ridership is low because we haven't had services available to us to meet the needs of the residents, besides for the call for partnership programs to expand service through cost sharing agreements or working through our regional council, how can we receive service here in Erie for our almost 35,000 and still rapidly growing resident population?
Thank you very much, sir, for the question. And I would say oftentimes there's this laser-like focus on ridership quite naturally in the transit space. But as we talk about the caliber of service from the vantage points of what's the value. So recognizing the call for project partnerships is the first step, so we can discern what that potential could be for ridership. Looking at those performance metrics will put us in a place in which we can gear up to discern if in fact there is the potential for enhanced service delivery. On the face of it, the service that was provided previously relative to it potentially being a bus or something of the like may have not been the best mobility option provided. This call for project partnership in reference to dealing with certain municipalities across the board will give us an opportunity to figure out, is there a better way for us to garner an understanding of what might be most advantageous for localized services in that area? So first up is engaging with the call for project partnerships. And when we talked about it being scalable, it will be very telling for us as we move the needle relative to the services being provided holistically. And as we talk about cost sharing, as we move forward, we will see what that means relative to the services that are being provided. Because with the call for projects, it could be a myriad of different options that are provided in that area. That could be, something that resonates with the on-demand feature. Because if there's not a propensity for transportation movement during peak times, it could be more advantageous to use some other mechanism. So this gives us an opportunity to engage with the service councils and those within your immediate area to garner a better understanding of those needs as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question comes from chat. This is Jesslyn Shahrazai from Lakewood. Can we expect an update on surplus RTD land around the region? Is RTD revisiting releasing some of the parcels of land that they hold for municipalities to partner in land use considerations?
So thank you very much for that question. That's a multifaceted question as we look to where we're going as an agency, futuristically speaking, and look to reduce the carbon footprint greater. As we look at land that's being held, especially more closely into the urban core, we have to discern a path forward relative to facilities as we look to potentially transition to a different service model, meaning change management, potentially with zero emissions and things of the like. So as RTD looks to the future to garner a better understanding of its change model relative to a fleet and transition plan for future generations, that will be assessed going forward. And I don't want to get too far in front of myself as we are working, and we'll bring something forward to the board as we look at having a summary of a scope of work for a fleet and transition plan. That most definitely will be part of that as we discern what type of facilities we may need, and then going forward, what options may be available, partnerships relative to, transit-oriented development and things of the like.
The next question comes from Mayor Justin Brooks of Erie. We really appreciate this update and the system updates that are being considered, especially the pricing adjustments. For suburban locations to the north that are within the RTD area, yet have very limited services, we are challenged to get members of the workforce into our communities from surrounding areas. With route demand being judged by current ridership levels, we are at a severe disadvantage, which is exacerbating our job vacancy issue. How do we advocate effectively?
So thank you very much for the question. I will go back to the concept of the sub-regional service councils, recognizing that the composition of those sub-regional service councils will give us a better understanding of the needs within that community, and the aspect of service delivery will put us in a different space. I do see Bill Soroy on camera. So Mr. Soroy, I will yield the floor to you, recognizing your role in the sub-regional service councils and in the planning department with livable communities, to see if you would like to impart any additional information.
Thank you, CEO Johnson. What I'd like to just say about the sub-regional service council process, I mean, the expectation is that we wanted to, one, create a forum for dialogue with communities. I think, particularly when we've heard over the last couple of years through the Reimagine process, and even before that, about the need to have dialogue about communities' needs, about, what communities are seeing on their end in terms of the need for transit. I think the other piece of that is for us to communicate to you what the opportunities are and what our challenges are. So we are really looking at the sub-regional service council process as the opportunity for that dialogue. And I think that, so that we're both kind of on the same page in terms of where we are at and probably looking at opportunities, because I think we can all agree that, if we could wave a magic wand, that we'd love to have a lot more resources in terms of both workforce and funding to have more transit, and we have to deal with that issue and what we have. And I think, with the sub-regional service councils, we can start that dialogue and, hopefully work and create a better partnership together.
Next question comes from Ari Harrison. Hello, my apologies for my tardiness. Our Erie town staff are conducting meetings with RTD service planners to make changes to the current RTD jump route in January 2024. The current jump route ends at the Erie Community Center. Staff are proposing an extension to the jump down Erie Parkway and up to the bus drop-off loop at Erie High School. The extension would operate right before, during, and after peak school hours. I don't know if there's a question in there or a statement, but thank you for that. If you have a follow-up question, you're welcome. Oh, I see it came in. We really need to provide some transportation assistance to our students who are not able to get bus access from SVVSD. If there's any follow-up to that, you're welcome to add it into the chat or raise your hand. Oh, it's coming in. I apologize. Can you please provide more clarity on the process?
So with that being said, and if there's further information that's needed, I will ask for that during the course of this response. So recognizing there were qualifications provided regarding our mutual staffs working in tandem, I would say that our planning and service planning staff will lean in as we talk about the limitation to provide service to youth that need to get to school. That is a big issue collectively around the country, but we are talking more specifically here in the region because there's not yellow school bus service. That's why we collectively are looking at zero fare. I recognize that if there's no service in Erie, that's not going to address the issue collectively. But as we talk about where we're going, I don't believe that we have service planning staff on the call, but we can double back. Will, Bill, or Charlie, if there's anything you can add, I will yield the floor to you. But as we talk about this more specifically, since this is a staff-based question, I will make a commitment to ensure that we have our planning staff circle back with City of Erie staff so we can delve a little more deeply in reference to garnering an understanding for next steps. Bill?
And I was going to say, we, with the sub-regional service council process, which I described earlier, the next round of meetings for that sub-regional service councils are expected to be in mid-April, about a month from now. And I think we are going to be sharing a lot more information on the project partnership process and the expectations associated with that. So, hopefully, look forward to your staff being engaged. I know Carlos Hernandez is engaged on the sub-regional service council. So we can look forward to having that engagement in next month.
Next question comes from Council Member Don Cameron, City of Golden. Local housing authority groups seem to have decided that TOD only means light rail adjacent. Do you know if a bus stop on a corridor, for example, 16 on Colfax, could be treated as TOD for development? Is this a question for the feds? It relates to the last question on excess RTD land use.
I will yield the floor to Mr. Soroy as this is in his wheelhouse to address. So please, Bill.
Thank you, General Manager Johnson. Yes, we certainly have examples of TOD associated around bus corridors. Certainly, we have one a primary one in Boulder at Boulder Junction, and other areas. I know we're working with the City and County of Denver in particular. With their efforts along Colfax, as an example that you provided, there's certainly planning and zoning changes that have happened to encourage higher density TOD development around stations, and we wholeheartedly support that and can work with your staff. And I'll offer me and my staff and my lead, Chessie Brady, who's the TOD manager at RTD, could work with anyone from the city of Golden on, opportunities around, bus-oriented TOD in your jurisdiction.
Next question comes in on chat from Mayor Mike Kaufman of Aurora. Partnerships with cities to work with RTD on security matters will be difficult for Aurora because we currently are experiencing a staffing shortage of uniformed police officers.
I would just say thank you very much, Mayor Kaufman. We recognize that as well. And we do have a agreement with the city of Aurora. And what we have often gotten is that, as we look at the workforce challenges across the region, that's one of the major implications in recognizing the hard job that law enforcement officers have. Oftentimes, we all need a respite, and oftentimes the overtime working as secondary employment isn't as appealing. So collectively looking at a myriad of different avenues, and that's why RTD does use, in some instances, a third-party contract with security, but we remain open and agile collectively as we look to, combat these issues that are prevalent throughout our region as well. So thank you for that, and we understand wholeheartedly and recognize those pain points as we, like other people on this call, are experiencing the same implications of the work bulk shortage and the lack of interest in certain areas with certain professions to actually come on board and take part in being part of the solution.
We have a hand raised. Emma Pinter has her hand raised, and I'll call on her.
Hey, good morning. It's actually Emma Pinter. Thanks. I wanted to ask a question as a follow-up to some of the service delivery questions that we've all been discussing this morning. Director, if I heard you correctly, you have almost 1,000 FTE that are short, as well as budgetary constraints that we all experience in local government and also impact RTD. I would really like to hear from you what the most painful shortfall is around. Is it around the FTE shortage? Is it budget? Is it projected budget? And while we all are contributing and have been contributing to RTD for years, what does non-monetary contribution look like to help you with some of these challenges?
Thank you so much for that question. That's a very good one. Our challenge isn't around budget, recognizing that we have been able to have vacancy savings just holistically. And when we talk about the biggest challenge as it relates to people power, it's really with our maintenance of way personnel. And for those that may not be familiar in reference to what I'm speaking about, it's keeping our assets in a state of good repair, recognizing that we are the only rail agency within the state. And when I say rail, I'm talking about delivering commuter rail and light rail. It's hard for us to identify that skill set. So we are hurting in aspects of maintenance of way, track workers, and our SCADA personnel, which is, it's a componentry as it relates to systems and things holistically. So as we have partnered with our union, we're looking to leverage an apprenticeship program so we can, have a laser focus internally, and also leverage a recruitment campaign that's underway with the military for veterans because they tend to have the skill sets as we go forward. So when we talk about other aspects from a non-monetary vantage point, there could be in-kind type of attributes or contributions, I should qualify it as we go forward. And I would be more than willing to have my staff or even I engage as we talk about the different options collectively. But to summarize, it's really the hard to fill positions, recognizing that we're more or less out on the island alone as relates to having readily available individuals that are skilled in the sense of having maintenance of way and maintainers and those focused on those key components, because in some instances we have to contract out that work and there's not a plethora of individuals within this immediate area, because oftentimes that has to be brought from outside of this region and even outside of the state.
Well, thank you for that. And, I know that you know this already, but our community colleges specialize in those hard to fill skill sets. And since RTD hopefully isn't going anywhere, I know that our community colleges around the region, and I'd be happy to name ours, Aurora Community College, as well as Front Range Community College, but I know that everyone on this call has a community college in their region that would stand up specialized programs. So if there's anything we can do or connections we can make to our workforce center or to our community colleges, I would be really interested in those conversations, because I know that you expressed your concern over 1,000 missing FTE. I'm concerned as well, and I know that my residents are deeply concerned about the service cuts that we've been experiencing. So anything we can do to help.
And thank you. And I most definitely will follow up, because we do or did have some partnership with community colleges, and recognizing the hardship. There's been some instances where some community colleges didn't want to continue on with some of the programs. And so I will ensure that we are in contact, and our chief people officer connects, because we do have some programs in play with some community colleges and with some universities as well. So thank you for that. And I'm glad to see we're in alignment on our thought process as it relates to mitigating our people power challenges.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinter. A question that came in from Council Member Kondo was, have you considered redoing the survey given the response rate?
I would surmise we're talking about the elected official survey, and quite naturally, as we looked at the results, and that's why we're here, and we're going to actually disseminate some communique after this to determine, was this helpful? What else might we do? We have Jennifer Webster, who is our local advocate, working in tandem with us, and we are in the process of reaching out to multiple jurisdictions to determine how best can we engage. And I know specifically our board is front and center with them being elected officials to engage with other elected officials to see what might be optimal as we go forward, because we do know it's not a cookie cutter approach for the 40 municipalities and the 8 counties that we have. So Michael Davies, if you want to add anything additionally, perhaps that I didn't cover, please feel free.
No, I think that covers it, and absolutely we will be doing the survey on a regular basis and providing opportunities for feedback. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Next question comes from chat. Tammy Maurer, Centennial City Council. Thank you, GM Johnson, for addressing the security issues. In the past, I've felt this concern has been ignored. The other concern is equipment maintenance at the light rail stations. Has the maintenance been increased at stations as well as on the trains?
So thank you so much for that question. And as we talk about maintenance, I'm not certain. So I was talking about maintenance of our infrastructure. When we talk about maintenance on the train, I'm not certain, are we talking about the cleanliness of the trains at the end of line stations? So I will just state, and if there's further clarification that could be provided in the chat, or one can raise their hand, more than happy to address. Recognizing our people power issues, we're trying our darndest as we go forward as relates to cleanliness and things of the like. We have hired additional service and cleaning staff. We had a large vacancy rate there, looking at a myriad of different ways to basically bring people on board. One thing that is challenging for us just holistically when we talk about, car cleaners on rail cars, they do have to know how to move a light rail consist. So when we talk about entry level, those are some things that we're looking at, because perhaps there's a different manner in which we can do that holistically. So there's the people power issue. Traditionally, when we get to end of line station, we ask the rail operators on light rail to walk through the consist. A myriad of issues could come into play with that as we look at the safety and the welcoming transit environment as well. And so as we talk about maintenance, the actual maintenance of the vehicles in and of themselves, that's what we have a laser light focus on, and ensuring that we can have the people power to address that. So not necessarily sure if I answered the question, but if there's further clarification needed, please let us know, and I will attempt to get you a response. Thank you.
No, Councilmember Maurer did raise her hand, so I'm going to
Okay.
let her ask if she has follow-up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, this is a different format than we're all used to. So, yeah, and I got to tell you that security issue, every time I get to talk to an RTD person, I bring it up over and over and over again, because as we are like a city to the south, and we used to have a lot of residents that would ride the train to work, but we no longer have that. But we still have the residents that want to get on the train to go to DCPA, go to the sporting events, and we just couldn't get people to get back on the train because they were afraid. So that has been huge, and thank you for just talking through it. But the other thing is when you do go to get onto the trains, a lot of times the equipment doesn't work. So you can't put your, to pay for to get onto the train. Or like the other day, it's like the telephones that are there for security reasons or for help, they weren't working. I mean, it just seems like every time we go, they don't work. And so that's what I'm looking at. And then when you get on the trains, it used to be very clean, and anymore it's pretty dirty. And that just gives you a feeling, that it's not being well maintained, that people aren't, that there's no staff watching out for, to take care of these things. So that's what I was asking. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the clarity. That really helps me. So as we talk about the fare collection system, I am surmising you're talking about the validators. And we basically have just changed out our validators going forward. So I will double back with our fare collection staff, because we have been monitoring that wholeheartedly. And I know we were having some glitches, and I just received a report that we have not had the same level in which we did. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Secondly, yes, in reference to all of the challenges, antisocial behavior, and the light rail vehicles, we put the light rail vehicles out for several hours, as you can imagine, during the course of the day. And there's people that come on to the light rail vehicle. And let me be clear, I am not absolving myself of the responsibility. What I'm sharing is that as we look at having more service cleaners, trying to discern how might we do that best by having individual stage ads into line stations, because putting that onus on the light rail operator to come out of the cab is challenging in and of itself. So as we go forward, I am optimistic in reference with our community policing model that our Chief Fitzgerald is implementing. That could aid, but then again, it's the other aspect of the antisocial behaviors. But we are putting forward steps, and as I said, we will basically come back with survey. And if there's any information you want to send in, if you have any inquiries or suggestions, we're open to that, because we can't know every single aspect. The eyes and ears out there. So I want to hear about these things so that we can collectively ideate and come up with some solutions to mitigate. So thank you so much, Council Member, for providing that clarification.
Thank you. And yes, we do. Whenever we see a problem, we report it. So thank you, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you. Mayor Kaufman, I can see your hand is raised. Do you have another question?
No, I think you answered it. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you. At this time, I don't see any other questions in the chat or hands raised. I'll just pause for just a moment in case anyone is typing any questions into the chat. Well, it is 8:40, and that concludes our time this morning. We greatly appreciate the feedback that we've received and this opportunity to engage with all of you. This has been very worthwhile to all of us, and we appreciate the candid questions and the opportunity to try and address. As CEO GM Deborah Johnson mentioned, please continue to provide feedback to us. A follow-up email will be sent out with some additional information and a link to today's recording. So if you joined us late or you weren't able to stay the entire time, you are welcome to share that link with your colleagues as well as we're trying to address these concerns and share this information. Once again, we greatly appreciate the time together. And with that, this concludes today's meeting, and have a safe and wonderful day.